Good evening, everybody. Let's start with our motivation. And come back to feeling very pleased about our precious human life and the opportunity it affords us. And the fact that we're still alive right now to use it. And we don't know how long we will be alive. And that once we die and this life is lost, it's very difficult to get another kind of life like this with all the same advantages. So just like if you have a child in a toy store with unlimited credit card, that kid is not going to waste any time in getting everything that they want. So similarly, when we have this life and the opportunity to practice the Dharma and progress towards liberation and enlightenment, then we shouldn't waste any time and should go in that direction. That doesn't mean we push ourselves. The child isn't pushing themselves and scolding themselves to go shop at the toy store. He's doing it with great delight. So in the same way, we should approach the Dharma with a mind of great delight, knowing that the Dharma brings happiness and wanting that happiness that the Dharma brings for ourselves and for all other living beings. Okay, so with that long-range motivation, aiming for the enlightenment of all beings, then let's put some energy into learning the paths and grounds of the hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas. So you might say, well, I'm following the Bodhisattva vehicle. Why should I learn about the hearers and solitary realizers? Yeah? Why do you have to learn about the hearers and solitary realizers? Why bother?
So we can teach them.
Yeah, because you might have amongst disciples in future lives people with that kind of inclination. So you want to know how they practice and be able to cater what you're teaching for their interests and their disposition. Okay, so even though we aim to practice the Bodhisattva vehicle ourselves, we should have a knowledge of the other vehicles. But at the same time that we're having that knowledge, we should take great care that we don't get interested in them and say, oh, only 3 lifetimes to attain a hearer's enlightenment? Oh, wow, that sounds much better than 3 countless great eons. You know, forget this bodhicitta business and all sentient beings. Anyway, they're a pain in the neck. Let's just go for a hearer's enlightenment. So you shouldn't let your mind go in that direction. Huh? And that's part of the reason, you know, many people took tantric vows recently in DC. So one of them is to not stay in a place with many people from the hearer and solitary realizer path for over a week. You know, and it's not because they're bad people. I mean, they're very, very good people. But because if our mind isn't strong, we could listen to all of their arguments for why that path is easier and quicker. And we could, you know, just accept those arguments and then give up the Mahayana, which would actually be a terrible tragedy if we did that. Okay? On the other hand, you know, if you have a choice between spending time with people who are hearers and solitary realizers versus hanging out with all your old friends who are drinking and drugging and going to the movies and talking about sports and all that stuff, then certainly you're going to want to be with people who are Dharma practitioners. Yeah, but you should be careful. When I went to Thailand a few years ago, at His Holiness's request, I stayed in a Thai temple for almost 2 weeks. And I felt like I was doing bodhisattva subterfuge. Not with the master. The master was really tuned in. In fact, he was building a Chenrezig temple. Yeah. But with his Western disciples, you know, because they were curious, kind of, what's this Mahayana stuff that you're not supposed to get involved with? And so I, you know, would talk about it, you know, and being of great benefit to sentient beings, and then they would tell me about, you know, how can you benefit all those beings, and you know, if you, in order to benefit everybody, you better get yourself out of cyclic existence first. And there's too many sentient beings, and it's too hard to benefit them. So I heard the reasons, and it was really interesting for me to hear them because, you know, before I had always studied and heard this kind of thing, but I hadn't met people who actually said that. You know, so it was very interesting for me to meet people, you know, very nice people, very kind and well-meaning people who had that kind of belief. Yeah, but I just kept dropping hints about bodhicitta here and there and here and there. Yeah. On the other hand, you know, there's no reason at all to get proud or arrogant because of being a Mahayana practitioner. If anything, we should be more humble, not more arrogant. You know, we shouldn't go around thinking, oh, I'm working for the benefit of all sentient beings. You know, you're working for yourself, selfish you. No, we shouldn't be like that at all. That just shows how far we are from the bodhisattva path if we have that kind of attitude. And also, in practicality, you know, many people on the here path are very kind and very compassionate, and sometimes more kind and more compassionate than people who declare themselves as bodhisattva followers. No? And one time I was invited somewhere to teach by a Mahayana temple, and when I got there, they were hemming and hawing about covering my air expenses, which really put me in a lurch. And then there was one Theravada place where I always teach when I go there, and the Bhante there, when I was there, pulled me aside and he said, oh, I hear you're having some trouble getting your airfare. Here, we want to help. And he gave me an envelope with the airfare, you know. And he's the person working for his own selfish benefit, quote, quote, whereas all these great, glorious Mahayana people didn't want to cover the airfare. So, you know, it was really a very good lesson for me, you know, about humility and about you don't know who somebody really is. You know, will the real Mahayana practitioners stand up? Because Mahayana practitioners will manifest as hearers, they'll manifest as non-Buddhists, you know, they'll manifest however way they can to be of benefit to whoever has that kind of tendency, you know. So we shouldn't be kind of smug and arrogant about this kind of thing. But really respect everybody. And I think especially within Buddhism, we need to exert more effort So to really meet people of other traditions and develop good relationships with them. You know, sometimes the people that are the most like you are the ones you have the hardest time getting along with, because you pick out all the little details of things. And so His Holiness says, you know, he has much more contact and much better relationships with many of the non-Buddhists, you know, people of other faiths, than he does with some Buddhists of different traditions. You know, and he says it shouldn't be like this. Yeah, and he's right, it shouldn't be like this. So we really need to exert ourselves and meet people and get to know them and respect their path and practice and see that it all comes from the same teacher, you know, our teacher, the Buddha.
Sometimes when I'm thinking about the hearers, solitary realizers paths, that kind of natural thing that arises in my mind is almost a fear of, you know, the possibility of taking the liking to it. So what is an attitude that you would recommend to try to cultivate towards
Okay, so you're saying sometimes when you think of here in solitary realizer, there's some fear that comes up of falling into that way of thinking. Actually, that could be a kind of wisdom fear. You know, they talk about the fear of samsara and nirvana. Nirvana being, you know, personal peace. And so we want to have a wisdom fear, not a panic fear, but just, you know, I know what kind of vehicle I want to follow and how I want to practice and where I'm going. And yet I also know that my mind is not free from self-centeredness, and it's not free from ignorance. And, you know, I'm afraid of the weakness of my present state of mind. You know, that I may lose something that I really cherish a lot, simply through my self-centeredness. So thinking like that is a kind of wisdom fear that helps us stay attentive, you know, and to be mindful and have introspective awareness. Okay? But it doesn't mean that we should be afraid of hearers and solitary realizers. They're wonderful people. Yeah? They're part of the Sangha jewel. Yeah, so they're reliable, you know, we can count on them. Okay, so there were a few things from last week I thought I should clarify before we go on, because a few questions came up. Last week, when I gave you the explanation of the what the stream enters, eliminate, and the once-returners and the non-returners and the arhats, and the way they progress through those 8 stages of being approachers and abiders to those 3 states. The question came up, do they, for them is the view of the personal identity, what in Tibetan we call jigta, or a view of the perishing aggregates, is that the root of samsara and the first link? And I said yes, and I should have said no, okay, because ignorance is the root. Also in the prasangika system, ignorance is the root, but the difference is in how they define ignorance and how they see the relationship with view of a personal identity. In the lower schools, ignorance is a not seeing, it's a fogginess, it's a blindness. Whereas in prasangika, ignorance actively misapprehends how things exist. So it's not just a fogginess about how they exist, but it actively believes they exist in the opposite way from how they do exist. Okay? So it's an actual grasping at the wrong mode of existence, true existence, or inherent existence. And because the view of the personal identity also grasps at the self, the I and the mine, as existing in that way, then it is considered a type of ignorance, or it is considered no different from ignorance. So in the Prasangika, the view of the personal identity is considered part of the first link, which causes samsaric existence. Okay? In the lower schools, ignorance is just this blindness, this fogginess, and the view of the personal aggregates misapprehends, thinking that there's a substantially existent I and mine. So the way they relate to their object is different. So the lower schools would say when you attain the path of seeing, or you become a stream enter, you've eliminated the view of the personal identity. But you don't eliminate ignorance until you become an arhat, or a foe destroyer, because it's only at that stage that all the afflictions have been eliminated from the root. And ignorance is the chief culprit. Okay? That clear? Huh? Then I also wanted to clarify, and we'll come back to this, about uninterrupted paths and liberated paths. That when an Arya is realizing emptiness directly, non-conceptually, okay, it can be either an uninterrupted path or a liberated path. The uninterrupted path comes first, and at that time, the person is perceiving emptiness directly. The level of afflictions that are being removed by that particular path or ground are no longer present, but they haven't been completely abandoned yet either, because remember the analogy I gave of you chase the thief out but you haven't locked the door behind you. So when that person passes on to the liberated path, at that point the door is locked and the affliction has been completely abandoned. Okay, so on the uninterrupted path, it isn't that the affliction and the wisdom are fighting each other, because the affliction is a polluted mind, and that wisdom is an unpolluted mind. And you can't have both of them present manifestly in the mind at the same time. So on the uninterrupted path, the wisdom is present. That level of affliction isn't present, but it has not been completely abandoned yet. Okay? So just to clarify that. Yeah?
In the first point, are you saying that the lower school is defining the view of the personal identity differently?
Yes. The lower schools do define the view of the personal identity differently than the Prasangika do, because the lower schools say that you just need to refute a person being self-sufficient, substantially existent, to stop your samsara. Whereas the Prasangika say, no, you need to see not only the person as empty of true existence, but also all phenomena as empty of true existence. So they define ignorance differently, they view the personal identity differently. Okay? So they define the Dharma refuge differently. What is the true cessation? What is the true path? Those are defined differently. So once you start defining ignorance, which is the root of samsara, differently, then there's a lot of other things that have to be adjusted along the way too. And here's where you really begin to see the difference between the Prasangika and the lower schools. Okay?
In the second point that you made, to say it in other words that maybe some were familiar, is this right? That you have in the uninterrupted path, because your mind is on emptiness, they are not present, but the seeds are still there. And then when you pass into the liberated path, then the seeds are wiped out. Is that? to it?
I'd have to check if the seeds are still there or not on the uninterrupted path. I don't think so, but I'm not sure.
Go directly from one to the other.
Yeah, because you go directly from uninterrupted path the next moment into the liberated path. So there's no chance ever, once you're on the uninterrupted path. I mean, the reason it's called uninterrupted path is because without any interruption, you're going to the liberated path. So there's no chance of those afflictions ever returning. Yeah, so I wouldn't think that the seeds would be there on the uninterrupted path. But this is just kind of a point that they like to make, you know, this tiny point to kind of emphasize the difference there. Okay. So I want to start again with the path of accumulation and kind of go through the 5 paths. And the path of accumulation is entered when you have day and night unceasingly, the mind aspiring for liberation. Okay, just as J. Rinpoche says in 3 Principal Aspects of the Path. So how do you get to that mind of renunciation or determination to be free? Because that mind on one hand is renouncing samsara, it's renouncing dukkha, and at the same time it's aspiring for liberation. So it's kind of doing both things. You're not just renouncing dukkha and going, oh, I don't know what I'm doing now, you know? And you're not just hanging on to dukkha but aspiring for liberation. You're doing both those things. So how do you get your mind to that state? Okay? Well, it's by meditating on the 4 Noble Truths. And in particular, meditating on the first 2 Noble Truths, true dukkha and the true origin of dukkha, so that we really get a very strong sense of how unsatisfactory cyclic existence is. Now, this is one topic in the West that we really don't like to meditate on. We want to go directly to light, love, bliss, tantra, emanating this and that and the other thing and all that kind of stuff. We don't want to really look at what our present situation is in an honest way. And without doing that, we're never really going to be able to do anything about it. Yeah? So it's very, very important to look realistically at our present situation. It's like somebody, you know, who has cancer but doesn't want to know that they have it, you know, or somebody who is an alcoholic who is making all sorts of excuses why they aren't an alcoholic. Yeah, so we're just exactly like that, and until we really get honest and you know, acknowledge what our situation is, then we're not really going to have the energy to do anything about it. We're going to keep kind of trying to have samsara and nirvana at the same time, because we think samsara is kind of a nice place to hang out. Yeah? So we just got done with the whole series, you know, on the 4 establishments of mindfulness. So I hope through, you know, studying that one thing you learned is how that leads you to have renunciation for samsara and aspiration for nirvana. Okay? Because when we meditate on the body, mindfulness of the body, then we see quite clearly how the body's nature and how foul and unattractive it is. Okay? So when you have, you know, instead of thinking body is beautiful and body is going to, you know, is really wonderful, you think body is pretty foul, then, you know, you start saying, well, why do I want to get another one in my next life? You know, and why do I want another one after that? Because I've had infinite kinds of bodies like this before. And it hasn't gotten me anywhere. They're all the same nature. You know, they're pee and poo factories. Yeah? Covered with skin. You know, that's what they say. It's a toilet covered with skin. And that's what we want to hug and kiss. Okay, so that's that mindfulness. When we have mindfulness of feelings, then we see that all the feelings, painful, pleasant, and neutral, are all in the nature of being unsatisfactory. You know, because none of them bring any kind of lasting pleasure. They're all, you know, that what we call pleasure is actually just a low-grade pain. Okay, so that also contributes to our renunciation of samsara. When we meditate on the mind, then we see that the mind is impermanent, changing moment by moment, and by extension, other things are impermanent too. All of our aggregates are impermanent. So what use is there in clinging on to impermanent aggregates? You know, that the most we're going to have them is the very next moment, because they're in the process of subtle change moment by moment. And even in terms of gross change, you know, how long can we have this body? You know, maybe max 120 years if we plan on setting a world record. Yeah, but how likely is it that we're going to be the ones to set that world record? So, you know, why cling on to this body if it's and this mind if it's changing? You know, why? Yeah, hold on to these contaminated or polluted aggregates. And then when we meditate on mindfulness of phenomena, we see that all phenomena are not a self, and they are not property of or they're not possessions of any kind of self either. And they don't have a self themselves. If you meditate according to the Prasangika way, you see all of these things as selfless. So again, you know, if they're selfless, what is there to hold on to? Okay, so when you meditate on the four establishments of mindfulness, it really helps us generate renunciation and the determination to be free. And it also helps us to generate the wisdom that will bring about the liberation that we want. So it performs both functions. There's other ways that we can meditate too to really develop our renunciation. And so you have in the Lamrim, you know, well actually it's not in the Lamrim, it's in Pali Canon too, the description of the three kinds of dukkha. Okay, the dukkha of pain, changeable dukkha, and pervading compounded dukkha. We talked about that in the four foundations, so I won't go through it now. There's also the 6 disadvantages of cyclic existence, and these are very, very helpful to contemplate. Yeah, and you can make it it should be a very personal contemplation. This isn't intellectual pizzazz, it's very personal. So the first of these 6 disadvantages is that there's no certainty in cyclic existence. So we all want security, you know. We want social security. We don't want it to be cut. We want relationship security. We want financial security. We want health security. Don't we? We're always looking for security, emotional security. Always, you know, something that's stable, that's secure, that's going to be there, that we can depend on. But the thing is that everything in cyclic existence is insecure. And there's absolutely no security to be found anywhere in cyclic existence. You know, none. Yeah, I mean, they can raise social security, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to suffer when we're old. And you can have health insurance, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to die. And you can have 5 wedding rings, you know, because that person really loves you, but that doesn't mean the relationship's going to last forever, or that they're always going to feel the same about you. You know, and you can have the property deed to a piece of property, but it doesn't mean it's always going to be yours. Yeah, so there's absolutely no security in anything in cyclic existence. No? And so when we meditate on this, it's really interesting just to watch our mind and to see how we're always trying to, peg something down, put it in a box. I need to have a plan so I know what's going to happen. If I have a plan, then I'm secure, because then my plan will happen. Yeah. So it's very interesting to take out our plans and see how many of our plans have ever happened exactly the way we planned them to. Yeah. And this is one of the big teachings here at the Abbey, and you see, you all had such problem at first, It's like, I had a plan for the day, but as soon as I got started, then everything changed, I don't like that. I want a stable situation where my plan can happen. Forget it. Yeah, but you can really see how much our mind resists that. Yeah, do you remember all those early community meetings? Why is everything changing? The schedule's changing on a dime. Why? Can we have a stable schedule? Can't we have a stable this and a stable that? Yeah. Well, the one thing I learned from being Lama Zopa's disciple is as soon as you have a plan, you know what won't happen. Yeah. Because that's what Rinpoche is famous for. Whatever is planned is not what is going to happen. You just don't know which parts of it isn't going to happen. Yeah. So you're really on your toes. But there's no certainty at all. Okay? So, really look at our state of mind that is seeking that rejects not having it, that is unhappy, with it not being there. And yet, seeing that that's the reality of a situation, and so therefore how much, our grasping doesn't like reality and is rejecting reality. Yeah. And how surprised we are when certain things happen. Yeah? It's like, oh, somebody died. I didn't have that on my schedule today, even though we knew they were terminally ill. We didn't think it was going to happen today. And all sorts of things come up, but we just don't have, on our calendar. That's why I'm always telling you, please schedule your crises. It would be much easier for me if you did, But people just don't schedule their crises, They have them when they want, and they expect instant attention. Okay? Then the second quality of cyclic existence is that it's completely unsatisfactory. Mick Jagger really got it right, can't get no satisfaction, because there isn't any. Okay, I think Mick Jagger was still trying to get some satisfaction, and he was complaining because he couldn't get it. But when you really realize that there's no satisfaction in samsara to get, then your mind relaxes. Then you stop chasing all those things. Yeah. But again, look at how much our grasping mind rejects that fact. We don't like the fact that there's no satisfaction. We want job satisfaction and relationship satisfaction and government satisfaction. Oy vey, there's definitely none of that nowadays, is there? But where is there satisfaction to be got that's anything lasting, that's really going to be true satisfaction? Sometimes we achieve a certain goal, or we do something we didn't think that we could do, and we feel some satisfaction from that, and that's fine. But that satisfaction isn't satisfactory, is it? Because it doesn't last. Yeah, and there's always going to be somebody who did it before us or did it better than us. Okay, then the third quality of cyclic existence is that you always get born again and again. Yeah, well, the third and fourth go together. You get born again and again, and you die again and again. So this is really the merry-go-round, you know. It's like you think, oh, if I die, then I'll finally have some peace. I mean, that's what people who commit suicide think, you know. If I suicide, then I won't have any problems. Forget it. You're still going to have problems. It doesn't cure anything. One of the guys that I write to in prison, he told me that he, you know, often contemplated suicide until he learned about rebirth, and then he realized suicide was just totally useless. You know, it's not going to stop the suffering. Because what happens? You get born again. And then after you get born again, you die again. Yeah? And so to really sit in our meditation and realize that, you know, that my mind, as it is right now, I am all set up for repeated birth and death. Again and again and again and again. Yeah? And who wants to keep being born and keep dying?
Yeah, but if you're a bodhisattva, you come back and come back and come back. So
Yeah,
what's the difference?
but because a bodhisattva isn't coming back and back and back under the influence of afflictions and karma, whereas we are. Okay? And even actually until you're on the path of seeing, bodhisattva path of seeing, you're still coming back due to afflictions and karma. You don't have complete control of the process. The lower level bodhisattvas don't. And so there's always that insecurity. Where are you going to be reborn? When it's up to afflictions and karma and we don't have control. It is pot luck. You know? We might set a lot of intentions, dedicate a lot of merit, create a lot of merit, but until we have, you know, actualized the path of seeing, we can't completely control our rebirth process. Okay? So actually that is the fifth disadvantage of cyclic existence, is that there's no certainty. So where we're reborn in cyclic existence is constantly changing. Yeah? And we go from the upper realms to the lower realms, to the upper realms, to the lower realms. You know, they say that we have been there and done everything in samsara. And it's really scary when you think about it. You know, I've been born in the hell realms for eons. You know? When you think about it, it's like, it's hard to imagine because we feel so solid, you know, with what we are now. But we've all done that. And there's no guarantee that we won't be born in the hell realms again, as long as there's afflictions and karma, you know, associated with our mind stream. And so there's no certainty at all. Yeah. So you can have, I think I told you about my time in China when I was out with some of my Chinese friends in some remote village, and there was a picture of the Gang of Four who had subsequently all gone bye-bye. But, you know, they were the peak of power. And my friend looked at them and said, and they all created the cause to be reborn in the lower realms, and that's probably where they are right now. So you could have the peak of power one moment, and the peak of incredible suffering and neglect the next moment. Yeah. So any kind of thing, you know, we think, oh, I attained this status in society, or I got this trophy, I got this title, I have a reputation and people respect me, or I have a certain amount of wealth and so people think that I'm really great. Whatever it is, it's so temporary. And next lifetime we're not going to have it, and we have no guarantee that we're going to have anything like it next lifetime. You know, because we have all this karma on our mind streams from previous lives. And, you know, if we die, I mean, if you might be very rich and popular and well-loved in this lifetime, but if you die with an angry thought, that's going to make some kind of negative karma ripen, and it's not going to be a happy rebirth. Okay, so, you know, there's no stability in our status in cyclic existence. And then the sixth vault of samsara is that we undergo all of this alone. Yeah, I mean, we spend so much time having relationships with people, and yet, you know, all of our suffering when we're alive, you know, our suffering is personal, isn't it? I mean, we always say misery loves company, and we feel a little bit better if, you know, somebody else is having the same hardship. But actually, our hardship is our own personal hardship, and nobody can take it away from us, you know. And why do we feel better because somebody else is having the same misery as we are? It's strange, isn't it, how we say misery loves company? We don't want to be the only one. But in fact, it is our own personal misery. And nobody can take it away from us, you know. We may have lots of loved ones. We may have people who care so much about us. They may be willing to sacrifice their life for us. But they can't take our suffering away. Not at all. You know, once our karma is ripening, the pain is there and we alone have to experience it. When we die, we alone experience it. Nobody else kind of goes along with us, holding our hand, saying, oh, it'll be okay. No, we die and we have our own death appearances and go through the whole thing ourselves. You know, so that factor of being alone is a real disadvantage to cyclic existence. And when you think about it, you know, how much time we put into, you know, trying to make relationships secure, and yet, by their very nature, they aren't. Yeah? So rather than be attached to other people, we should try and benefit each other. Yeah, it makes more sense, doesn't it? To benefit somebody rather than to cling on to them. Clinging on to them doesn't do any good at all. Because we can't stop their suffering, they can't stop ours. Yeah? But if we really try and benefit them, then, you know, something good can come from it. People always ask me, well, how can I help my relatives? And I say, stop telling them to lie to cover up your mistakes. Yeah, stop telling them not to give generosity, you know, to give offerings and to be charitable, you know, but to keep the money for the family. Stop telling them that. That's a real way to benefit them. Encourage them to be, you know, generous. Encourage them to be kind. Yeah. People always want me to give some other method to fix their relatives so their relatives can become who they want them to be, you know. That's what they think benefiting other people means, that I can make them be what I think they should be. Yeah, no, that's not it. Okay, so those are the 6 disadvantages of cyclic existence. There's also a list of 8 that are attributed to the human realm, but I think they apply to other realms too. So the first 4 are, you know, birth, aging, sickness, death. Those apply throughout cyclic existence. And when you think about those, you know, I mean, they're a given. We always rejoice when a baby is born. We think it's wonderful. But the only thing that's going to follow from birth is aging, sickness, and death. It's true, isn't it? Yeah. And even the birth process isn't so fun. I mean, they call it labor for a reason. Yeah? But, you know, so those 4 aren't any fun, you know, and yet they're givens in life, aren't they? And then in addition, we can't get what we want, even though we try and get it. We're constantly facing frustration, aren't we? We can't get what we want, even though we work very hard. And then instead, we get what we don't want. So even though we work very hard not to get certain situations, they come our way anyway. And then there's sometimes when we are successful in getting what we want, but then we lose it again. or it doesn't make us as happy as we thought it was going to, and we're left flat, disappointed again. And then eighth is just having a body and mind under the influence of afflictions and karma. Okay? So again, really going through those things and thinking about them and, kind of, this is my situation. I am subject to those 6, or I am subject to those 8. And looking at our lives, and they're all around us all the time. Yeah? And then thinking, this is, I don't like this situation. This is the nature of samsara, and it is totally unsatisfactory. And there's the potential to attain Buddhahood. There's a potential to attain liberation. And so I am determined to attain liberation and to be free of this merry-go-round of cyclic existence. I renounce this merry-go-round. There might be little bits of happiness in it here and there, but they're not real happiness. They're nothing to rely on. So I'm not going to be captivated by these things. They're there and they're gone. So I'm not going to make the purpose of my life trying to get these things that can't provide any kind of lasting happiness or lasting security. Okay? So when you meditate like this, your determination to be free gets stronger, your renunciation gets stronger, and you also become better able to weather the storms of samsara, and you don't suffer so much because you don't have so many unrealistic expectations anymore. So it's interesting that by renouncing samsara, you don't have as much samsaric suffering of the gross kind, but you become very, very sensitive to even the subtle samsaric suffering because you see how all-pervasive it is. Yeah? But you think about it, when you stop expecting security, then your mind is so much more flexible to accept situations the way they are. If we stop expecting that our status is always going to go up and up and up, then we don't get so bummed out when it goes down. Yeah? So our minds become much more flexible. We aren't expecting so much satisfaction in samsara. So we aren't looking for fame and wealth and reputation and praise and love and all these things. We're more just content with what is and not, doing somersaults to try and get things that are not going to bring the happiness we want. Okay? And instead, we're going to start seeing that that real happiness comes from inside here. Do you remember when His Holiness spoke about that in D.C.? And he was saying, the real happiness comes from in here. It comes through our spiritual practice. So let's put our time and energy into cultivating that. Okay? Any questions? Yeah.
So, just thinking about this rebirth thing, it's not necessarily linear, is it? So, for example, if, maybe in previous lives, if you've been a very devout Christian, maybe you've been a monastic, perhaps a monk or a nun in a Christian faith, Roman Catholic or something, maybe, in future lives you become a devout Buddhist, and then maybe again, so how can I put this one? So I'm thinking, for example, imprints from different religious faiths, like we have imprints in our lives from different kinds of habits and tendencies and things in previous lives. But let's say you're quite a committed Buddhist, but maybe you've had previous lives where you've been very devout Catholic, and so then the idea of a God, even though you look at it from a Buddhist perspective and think, well, this doesn't make sense, but those imprints are actually quite strong.
Yeah, yeah. Right, okay. So you're saying that, let's say in a previous life you followed a theistic religion, or even earlier in this life we followed a theistic religion. Now we've become Buddhist. You're saying being Buddhist, it's not secure that we're always going to be Buddhist in our future lives, because the imprints of the theistic religion are very strong in our mind, and our mind's tendency to like those, you know, kind of people like the idea of there's an all-powerful being and I can surrender to that, you know, whereas in Buddhism, I mean, we have to take responsibility.
But it could also be, I mean, I see that, but where you feel that you have a real devotion to what your idea of a God is, not just that it's comfortable, but there's something that holds you.
Right, yeah, so there could be something that holds you in your belief in God, even though on one level you're saying, I don't believe in God, I'm a Buddhist, but on another level, when things get tough, you're praying to God, because there's some kind of devotion or faith there. Yeah, that's habitual, because that imprint is strong. And that's very real, and that happens to people. I've met people that's happened to. And so I think that's one reason why His Holiness really stresses that we have to understand the Dharma, you know, and we have to use reasoning to understand it, because it's only through that reasoning that we're going to get some sure conviction and sure faith. Yeah, if it's just a matter of devotion or comfort, then it's not going to be stable even in this life, let alone from this life to future lives. So I think it's very important to really, again, acknowledge our wrong views and to apply the antidote to them and spend some time thinking, especially about emptiness, you know, in order to correct our view. Yeah?
So then, following on from that then, so you've had these previous lives where you've been, you know, theistic, whatever, so you're a devout Buddhist now, maybe you're a monastic, maybe you're not, but you know, working with Buddhism and all of that. So does that guarantee then that in your next life you're not going to become?
Okay. So being a Buddhist this life, does it mean in next life that you're not going to, that you will be a Buddhist again and not be a follower of a theistic religion? No, it doesn't, because we could have very, very strong imprints from the previous life. And, you know, if at the time you're dying you have somebody talking to you about God and all this stuff, and then that sparks your imprints from your previous life, then you know, you could follow those early imprints or those habitual imprints. Yeah? So that's why it's very important to really know why we're Buddhist and have firm faith that's based on reasoning and understanding, you know, and to do a lot of purification of our wrong views, you know, purifying them by meditating on emptiness and using reasoning to understand the path, but also by prostrations and vajrasattva and so forth. Yeah?
Twice you mentioned that at the moment of the death, like, we could have anger thought, and now that somebody talked to us about religion. So the when at the moment of death is very, very important.
The moment of death is very important, because what the strong thought is at the time of death has an influence over what karma will ripen.
Really?
Yeah. So of course, if there's some karma that's very, very strong, you know, maybe the thought is not going to have such a powerful impact. But, you know, the thought at the time of death, because you see, even from life, even in our life, from moment to moment, whatever our thought is going to influence what ripens in the next moment. Yeah? If we're mad at somebody, yeah, if you're using any kind of tool and you're mad at somebody, are you more likely to get injured than if you're not mad at somebody? Yeah, aren't you? I mean, I remember vacuuming one time, and I was really mad, and I stopped and I said, if I'm not careful, I'm going to get hurt vacuuming. Because I saw that, you know, what I was doing could easily make some kind of negative karma ripen, you know, through my carelessness when I'm angry. Yeah.
This brings up my old question again about what to pray for. Do I pray for a precious human rebirth or the Pure Land? But it scares me now to pray for a human rebirth.
Okay.
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay, so do we pray for precious human rebirth or for rebirth in a Pure Land? Yeah. I think it's good to cover both bases and say either or. Okay? Because just on a personal level, sometimes I just look at human life and I go, you know, I don't have the strength to go through some of this again. And it's just, you know, I can't trust my mind in a future life to be able to go through some of this. So while rebirth in a Pure Land is good because there all the conducive conditions are present, you know.
You feel safe.
And yeah, you're not going to backslide. Whereas, you know, you have a precious human life, you can still backslide. But then it was interesting during the time in D.C., you know, because they always say that a human body is the best body to practice Tantra with. Okay? And I began to think, wow, you know, if I get born in a Pure Land, that might actually be slower than if I'm able to practice Tantra. But I'm not really capable of practicing Tantra now, so, you know. So kind of in this, you know, which one? So that's why I just say one or the other. I'll settle for either one because I don't know which one in the long run is going to be better. Okay. Other questions or comments?
So
Yeah.
Under the 6 disadvantages of a cyclic existence, so when you got to the 5th one, no certainty where we will be born, and as I heard you talking, I felt some hopelessness come up. And so then I was trying to think about how to work with that. Is it better to just kind of just open to and accept, don't know what's going to, you know, where I will end up, or to kind of really direct your attention so clearly to where you want to be. You know what I mean?
Okay. So when I was talking about the uncertainty of what we're going to be reborn as, you started feeling hopeless. And so then you're wondering how to counteract that, you know, and do you just kind of stay open to it, or do you direct your mind to where you want to be reborn? Well, if we just kind of say, let the hopelessness run its course, that is not going to be very good. You know, not at all. And so the idea is when we see that there's no certainty, then, okay, then I really need to practice, and I really need to take care with how I dedicate. Yeah? And you can dedicate for rebirth in a Pure Land or rebirth as a precious human life. You can dedicate like that. That's no problem. And also, when you dedicate for enlightenment as a byproduct of that, you're also implying a good rebirth so that you can continue to practice the Dharma so that you can become enlightened. Yeah. So the purpose of meditating on all these different disadvantages of cyclic existence is not to feel hopeless. It's to energize ourselves to do something about the situation, because it isn't hopeless. If it were hopeless, then there would be no purpose in the Buddha teaching, because there would be no way for us to get out of samsara. But the whole reason the Buddha is alerting us to these potential dangers is so that we can do something about them.
I don't understand the dedication.
The dedication? What don't you understand?
you know, when we dedicate,
Uh-huh.
I just married maybe soon. So
Yeah.
what is that dedication will bring me to where I want to be?
Okay. Well, when we're dedicating, you know, due to this merit, may I soon become, you know, attain this state of Guru Buddha. Then the state of Guru Buddha is enlightenment. So we are dedicating the merit we created and everybody else's merit so that we can attain enlightenment. We're directing that current of energy to how we want it to ripen. Yeah. Whereas, you know, it's like if you, you know, if you earn some money, you put it in the bank right away. Yeah, because you're directing it to, you know, a safe place, ha ha ha. But if you just get some money and you leave it out on your dining room table without directing it anywhere, then very good chance, you know, the cat's going to come along and, you know, kind of throw it all over the place, or your kids are going to take it, or something else will happen. Okay, so that's why we dedicate. We're steering consciously the merit to how we want it to ripen. Okay, so strong dedications are quite important.
I have a question. I think it follows on from Venerable Jigme's question. So about future rebirth. So you have some of these teachers who are, you know, we've known like Lama Yeshe and others who are able to direct their consciousness into, you know, decide where they want to be reborn and stuff, but do they really have control over their karma? See, I get confused here because with some teachers, you know, they give some indication of where they're going to be reborn or in what family and so on. With Lama Yeshe, for example, his Spanish students and stuff. So, but then when you look at, you know, you see how the person is or what they're manifesting in their behavior and so on. You know, this applies to a number of teachers who transferred their consciousness and so on. You know, when we see what they're doing, we think, gosh, why are they doing that? Is that because we're not enlightened, or because they don't really have... Okay, my question really is, even though you're able to direct your consciousness into a particular rebirth, doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be able to control your karma in that sense.
Okay, when you're talking about, you know, people, especially, you know, the Tibetan system of identifying reincarnate lamas, there's many different levels of incarnate lamas. You know, some are Arya Bodhisattvas who can actively direct their rebirth and make manifestations, and those people are completely, you know, I mean, they're really doing what you know, is best for the people around them. There's lower level bodhisattvas who can't control their rebirth, and they can't control the ripening of their karma in the next life, but they certainly have put a lot of dedication, they've created a lot of merit, they have a lot of wisdom, they've been directing that energy in a certain way, so it's much more likely for them to attain a certain kind of rebirth and in a certain kind of family and be able to meet the Dharma and everything else. Then there's other people who are recognized as incarnates, who aren't even on the path, and just by some kind of good karma, you know, they're recognized that, and they have that kind of social status. So, you know, within this whole field of incarnate lamas, there's many, many different kinds, many different levels. Yeah, and that's exactly why His Holiness says, don't rely on people's titles, look at their qualities. Yeah, when we're selecting teachers. Okay. And then also, I mean, some of them who are high bodhisattvas, they're also going to, the way they act is also going to be in relationship to the karma of the people that they have the intention to benefit in that particular life. So they may appear in one form or another according to what's going to be best for the people that are around them in that lifetime that they can benefit.
And we know nothing about it.
And we You're right, exactly. And we don't know. So it's, you know, just leave it. We don't need to worry about their rebirths. We need to worry about our rebirths. And we don't need to worry about what they've understood and haven't understood. We need to worry about what we've understood and haven't understood. Okay. You have a question?
I do. I'm sorry, but I really didn't understand the second point you were making at the very beginning. I guess you were trying to say the thing with the uninterrupted path and the liberated path was that it wasn't really this battle that you described this time?
Right. Yeah, the point of that second point at the beginning was that at the time of the uninterrupted path, you don't have both an affliction and a wisdom mind that are fighting each other. Because you can't have a polluted mind and an unpolluted mind manifest at the same time.
It's just that what you're doing then severely cuts.
Yeah, at the time you have that direct insight into emptiness, that level of affliction isn't there. Yeah? It can't be there because you can't be perceiving emptiness. You know? With that, okay? Yeah. Okay. Good. So next week we'll continue. You know, here we were talking a little bit about what you have to do to get on the path of accumulation of the here and solitary realizer vehicle. And also we need to have the same kind of renunciation for a bodhisattva vehicle. Okay? And what great compassion is it's having this renunciation not just for ourselves but for everybody else. Okay? So spend some time this week meditating on these points. And then we'll continue next week kind of with more description of, you know, path of accumulation, path of preparation, and so on. Okay?